10, ports, arms, forward, march. Abby Gordy sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Abby. Now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. Color guard. Left, face. Port, arms. Forward, march. Okay, everyone, you can take your seats. Thank you, Abby. She was a senior high student. So please join me in prayer. Oh, Lord our God, we give you thanks for what you've done for us in the past and the present. And we pray for those that you're going to do for things we're going to do for us in the future. We pray for peace in this world, so that we can lay down our arms and enjoy time with our families and enjoy time with our fellow veterans who worked so hard and went out there in front of the enemies, willing to expend their life for our country. So we give you thanks for that, and we ask especially for peace in Ukraine and the whole areas of the world that are under tensions at this time. In your name we pray, Lord. Amen. We have not only a person who's in Forest Lake High School right now, and we have a lot of people in here that have graduated from Forest Lake High School, but one in particular is Carla Holt, who's going to be our speaker today. She graduated in 1991, a few years ago. She's married to Gary, and they have 2 children. And she's a reporter at KARE 11. She's an award-winning journalist. She's an adjunct professor at St. Olaf College, and she's the founder of So Many Goodbyes. And so, Carla, tell us about that and take over the show.
Hello. So good to see everyone here today. It is truly such an honor. Thank you so much for having me. It's unbelievable to be here with familiar faces and friends and those who have served. I just want to begin on that note. Thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart for your service, for what you have done and what you continue to do as role models throughout our community. So as mentioned, yes, I'm Carla Holt. I am a Forest Lake High School graduate of the early 90s, sometime back then. I also do work at Care 11 and at St. Olaf College. And yes, I did found a company called So Many Goodbyes related to the Alzheimer's journey. And that is how actually I lost my dear dad. The Roberts family funeral home, their wonderful family, as we know. I graduated actually with Kelly Roberts and Corey Roberts too. They happen to be twins, if you don't know. And they are hosting me for a community conversation next month, which I'm really grateful for, to talk about a cruel disease that truly touches everyone. But today is about honoring a lot of you here in this room. A lot of you here in this room. And we know that our world is noisy and busy, and we don't take that time to acknowledge your service enough. So this is appropriate, it is important, and it is needed. And I am so gratified for this opportunity to take this role and help you to acknowledge your service, help all of us acknowledge your service. I would be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge Stan Turner, our dear friend. He is very sad to not be here today, but he is looking forward to next year and rejoining this community. So he sends his best regards as well. Of course, he would love to be here as well. We have many special guests with us here today, and we are fortunate to have all of you in these seats. We really appreciate it. But we also want to specifically acknowledge Larry Howes. He is the former House representative who authored the bill that was signed into law in 2008. Many of you may have followed this when it happened, right? Back in 2008, that proclaims March 29th as Vietnam Veterans Day in Minnesota. Such an important acknowledgement. So we are proud to have you here with us today. Larry, wherever you might be, will you please stand? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. That's a legacy right there. Thank you for doing that. We really, truly appreciate it, and we are grateful that you sponsored what has become an important tradition in our state. We also want to recognize Representative Bob Detmer, who we all know is retiring after this year. He has had a phenomenal service to this community. He is also a retired CW4, so truly served his community and his country in multiple ways. Representative Detmer, would you please also stand? I will acknowledge, too, that Representative Detmer was the wrestling coach back when I was in high school, and I believe you led them to a state title. Yes, very phenomenal. So has had success at multiple points of his career, contributed to his community in multiple ways, obviously. Also, we want to recognize that if they are here today, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, ARVN. Is there anyone here from that community present in this room? Yes, I see a couple of hands over there. We thank you so much. Thank you for being here. For those who didn't know, they were, of course, a contingent of the Allied forces, the secret warriors, specifically, that fought communist aggression in Laos. Many of them ended up resettling here, of course, in Minnesota. And as the Americans pushed beyond the borders, more hands in the air, thank you so much for being here. You all can stand, please, please. Thank you. Thank you. We thank you for fighting alongside our soldiers, our military, and we thank you as well for being here today. It's truly an honor. And we certainly salute your historical efforts and cannot thank you enough. So I believe that that is the point at which we have acknowledged our special guests. Many of you, though, everyone, I'm going to note, sitting in these seats today, has a connection to a special guest present here today. So I want to emphasize that. Thank you truly for your service. We should do that more often, but at least on this day in March, and again on Tuesday, we will nobly and specifically acknowledge your noble service. So thank you again. We do want to move to this important and beautiful opportunity to acknowledge and honor a family I actually happen to have a personal connection to. The 2022 Vietnam Veterans Memorial Scholarship honors veteran Ralph Huntosh Jr., otherwise known as Bud. I remember him as a child, larger-than-life figure. I see his daughter here in the audience. Of course, I see his widow and his grandchildren. He was a remarkable person, as was his daughter, Rachel, who this family also recently lost. A lot of loss. So it is a great and beautiful honor to acknowledge Bud's service and to acknowledge this family and all they have done for this community. And I specifically want to recognize Judy, who is sitting there, Bud's widow. Thank you. Thank you for being here today and bringing your beautiful family. And your grandchildren and your daughter. Thank you, all of you, for being here and for what your grandpa gave to this country. It's important for you to know that, what your grandpa did for your country. So with that, they obviously are behind a scholarship. The essay topic this year for that scholarship was In America's Long History. Now hold on, because this topic is really lofty. It's impressive what these students had to address. In America's long history, battlefield medical care early on became a necessity. Army combat medics and Navy hospital corpsmen assigned to Marine combat units have been on the front lines in numerous wars involving U.S. forces dating to the American Civil War and continuing through 2 world wars. In this 600-word essay, trace the evolution of battlefield medics with special emphasis on the role of medics in the Vietnam War and the 21st century advancement of today's battlefield tools and medical care that grew from efforts during the war in Southeast Asia. Wow, right? Impressive topic. Also very impressive is Ava McCarver. Could you please join us right now, Ava, in reading your winning essay on this very topic?
Medical care has had many technological advancements and examination of the impact of those advancements on the battlefield medical care during wars of the great importance. Battlefield medical care is intended to stop the patient's bleeding and offer immediate medical care to save lives. Advancements include the introduction of stretchers during the mid-20th century to improve transportation vehicles in World War I and World War II, to the introduction of mobile Army surgical hospitals, MASH, during World War II. The MASH units were heavily used during the Korean War, which allowed medical personnel to be closer to the front lines, thus saving many lives. The Vietnam War was different as it was mainly fought through guerrilla forces by the Viet Cong, and the MASH units weren't as effective under that type of fighting. The Vietnam War required the U.S. to find new and innovative ways to save soldiers' lives. The Vietnam War was unlike any other war the U.S. had fought. It was fought in jungle and the jungle land and topography were unknown to the U.S. In addition, the Viet Cong fought with underground tunnels, booby-trapped landmines, and guerrilla warfare. In order to provide medical services to the U.S. troops, the U.S. had to change their tactics. One successful tactic was moving away from the MASH units and developing MUST units. MUST stands for Medical Unit Self-Contained Transportable. The difference between these two medical units was the MUST units were expandable mobile shelters with inflatable ward sections. Expandable sections were also provided for the radiology, laboratory, pharmacy, dental, and kitchen areas. These units were more mobile than the previous used MASH units and allowed the medical teams to take the hospitals to the injured soldiers. Medicine during the 1960s and 1970s saw improvements in surgical care, improvements in anesthesia, burn and wound care, and the improvement of vaccines and medicines assisted the medical teams. One of the most important advancements from the Vietnam War was the ability to use frozen blood products. Fresh blood can only be used for 21 to 30 days before deteriorizing. Frozen blood can be used for up to a year. This advancement would allow blood donors stateside to provide blood to the soldiers. The Vietnam War also gave us major advances in vascular surgery, which included a registry for documenting vascular wound cases. The advent of the helicopter was a major improvement for the medics during the Vietnam War. Helicopters were used during the Korean War, however, their use was the H-13 Sioux, while the Vietnam War mainly used the American Bell UH-1 Huey. It is important to note that the helicopters went through a series of advancements, and the use of the Huey in the Vietnam War was an upgrade. The greatest strength was its versatility. The medical missions were called dust-offs and were one of the most dangerous missions during the Vietnam War. Because of these missions, soldiers were able to get medical attention in less than an hour. Out of the soldiers transported to the hospitals, 98% survived. The world continued to evolve and improve in its medical discoveries. Telecommunication drones have been used for diagnosis and treatment and telemonitoring in remote areas. Drones have the potential to provide medical delivery platforms, including vaccines and medicines. I envision drones being used to scouting missions to determine the best way to reach a soldier and to scout out troops, to ensure the medical personnel are protected while ensuring the soldiers receive the best care possible. It is important to continue to evolve our medical capabilities to ensure our soldiers receive the best care available.
I think that is wonderful, so impressive. And I think what is especially touching to this community, especially Ava, is the fact that you really invested time and energy to learning about a time in our history and in our country's history that has affected all of us, affected our development to the point that we are today. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for highlighting all of the contributions medically and in terms of the service represented here. I want to call upon Terry Cabioya. Is she here? Terry, or rather, he here. Terry, thank you, Terry. Could you please join us now to present Ava with her scholarship?
Ava, on behalf of Minnesota Vietnam Veterans Charity, we're pleased to present you with this $500 scholarships check so you can better your education. I understand you want to be an ophthalmologist?
Yes.
Well, good for you. That's terrific. I just had cataract surgery last week, so they're important. So I want to thank you very much. You have an impressive resume, and I thought your write-up was excellent.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to make a couple other comments. First of all, Minnesota Vietnam Veterans Charity is the sponsor of Honor Flight. Honor Flights are finally going to resume this October. So anybody, especially World War II, Korean veterans, at this point terminal Vietnam veterans, you can go under our website, Honor Flight Twin Cities, and download the application if you're not already on it, and get on the list. Right now we have quite a few people waiting to go because we haven't gone for 2 years. So, did you have any commentary?
Company, attention. So we have, it's Monday, the 10th of October, first time in 3 years. These trips cost $100,000. It used to be $60,000 for the airplane and another $40,000 for the rest of it. I don't have an idea how much it costs. They haven't given me the contract yet. I just got it. So praise God for that. Sun Country will be the airline. And as I said, Perry was saying before, we started this 14 years ago, 2008. And Terry was really the one who did that because we were approached by some people and said, well, we can do that. We have a car donation program, and that sponsored the first one. But so the 250 or so that we have on the list, so we're going to find out who's still cooking and who's still living. and then we're going to go from that. So I want you to know that the World War II is difficult to find those people still ready to go. Korea are still there. They need to go on this flight. And guy says, well, what about us Vietnam veterans? And I says, well, guys, get in line just like the rest of the world. And we do take terminally ill Vietnam veterans. We've taken 13, and we appreciate all those who've helped and support. And it's just an honor for us to do this. Thank you.
I might add, if anybody's got an extra $1,000 or $10,000 laying around you'd like to donate, it's always welcome to help pay for those trips. They are expensive, as Jerry mentioned. One of the questions I was asked to research, should have had Ava do it for me, was how many people served in Vietnam? In my research, the answer I got from the DOD was their best guess is between 2,709,918 and 3,173,845. Now, why the Department of Defense doesn't have an exact number, I haven't got a clue. But that's the answer. That's the answer I found on that. The other question was, how many Vietnam veterans are alive today? Of that number, and by the way, that number that I just read off, or that inclusive number, were veterans that served in country, in Vietnam, or in territorial waters around Vietnam. It also includes air people, Air Force people, or flight people that were flying over Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand. So it's pretty inclusive, but I don't understand why they don't have a direct number. I tried to find out how many Vietnam service ribbons were awarded. I couldn't even find that number. So it looks like there's about 3 million that served in Vietnam. As of right now, according to the American War Library, they estimate that approximately 1/3 of those that served in Vietnam are still alive. That means that 2/3 have passed away since. And now those numbers were as of 2007. So those are old numbers. So we're a group that's fading fast. And of the 2.5 million, 2.4 million, or 9% of those who served, have a service-connected disability. 800,000 who served in Vietnam have a service-connected disability. Those are the numbers that I was able to come up with. If we have any veteran service officers here today, they may be able to give you more accurate numbers. I don't know why some of these things are so difficult to find, but it was tough. I should have had Ava. She could do a much better job than I could on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you for what you're doing to lead the community and for your service as well. And I think Terry acknowledged what is the truth. You have waited, as our world has waited, a couple of years to gather, right? So I think it just is notable that we are together in a room to acknowledge this important day and to, again, acknowledge your service, and we are grateful for that. I don't think any of us anymore will ever take coming together for granted again, will we? So with that, I did want to acknowledge our next special speaker. We are honored today to have the grandson of Ralph Huntosh. His name is Mason Erdahl. He will be speaking on behalf of the Huntosh family. And I just wanted to note again, from my personal experience, Bud, Ralph, and Rachel both were larger-than-life personalities. Very fun, very vibrant people. So this is truly an honor to have you with us here today, Mason. If you could join us now.
Hello, my name is Mason Erdahl. I'm one of Bud Huntosh's 7 grandchildren. I'm happy to be here today to tell you about my grandpa's life. Bud Huntosh was born on November 13th, 1948, into a family of 5. My grandpa met my grandma when they were 19 through their 2 siblings and shared a wonderful life together. Together, they raised a family of 3, including my Aunt Rachel, my mom, Rebecca, and my uncle Isaiah. Before that, however, my grandpa enlisted into the Marine Corps to fight in the Vietnam War for his country. Though he was only a radio repairman, he wanted to go to Vietnam to fight. Instead, he was sent to a psychologist because they thought he must be crazy for wanting to go fight. He was enlisted for 3 years. Though he did not ever get to fight in Vietnam, my grandpa was proud to serve the country that he loved. After the war, my grandpa went home to raise his family and help out other people, which he loved doing. A few examples of how my grandpa helped out the community was serving at church, volunteering for community care, helping people in Quest 180, and going on mission trips. Every year for Christmas, my grandpa would bring me and my siblings shopping for supplies, and then we would put together gifts to send to Operation Christmas Child. Another example of helping out anyone was how in Quest 180, he met a man who had been sentenced to go to prison. My grandpa still loved him, visited him in prison, and helped to take care of his young family while he was gone. One of his favorite verses from the Bible was, "Fear not," which appears in the Bible 365 times, one for each day in the year. His favorite one was from Joshua 1:9, which was, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." My grandpa loved his family. He went to every event he could with my grandma. I don't remember one game of mine that he did not go to. He cared about his family more than anything in the world. Sadly, though, my grandpa died from cardiac arrest in December of 2019. I remember being woken up that morning just to hear from my dad that my grandpa had just died that morning. It was a huge shock for my family. We did not expect him to die, and I still can't fully get my mind around him being gone. Many of you have experienced the trauma of one of your best friends or family members getting killed in battle or suffering after they came home. I would not be able to stand seeing my grandpa getting shot down, let alone die. Yet many of you guys have seen something like that and you stayed strong. You fought for your country in Vietnam just to be underappreciated by some citizens of the U.S. The sacrifice you made for this country is unfathomable and amazing. You are truly brave. I am incredibly grateful for the sacrifice that veterans and active servicemen made and continue to make for our country. Thank you for honoring my grandpa today. Along with many of the servicemen in this room, he was a proud serviceman, a loving family man, and one of the most generous people I've known. My grandpa meant a lot to a lot of people in this world. We are proud to be able to carry on his legacy.
Mason, how old are you?
11. I turn 12 next week.
11 years old. He turns 12 when?
Next week.
Next week. All right, remember him.
Remember him.
That was absolutely beautiful, Mason. Thank you. That was beautiful. Our topic this year, of course, is Wounded in War, and so we want to honor others who can connect to this topic, and certainly most of you can, either personally or by someone you know. Combat medic and veteran Bill Strusinski will be joined by Vietnam veterans Tim Sather and Ben Morales. All 3 gentlemen, truly heroes, were all wounded in the war and medevaced out for care. Are any of them here today? All here. There they are in the front row. If they wanted to wave, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your service. Thank you truly for your service and for your contributions. We also want to honor 2 combat nurses, Valerie Buchan and Mary Lou Bruner. Are they here as well? Can they wave their hands or stand, whichever they prefer? There they are in the front row. Thank you so much for your service as well. And an interesting fact about these two nurses, every soldier they cared for received the Purple Heart. Yeah, pretty notable. Thank you. We do thank again each of you. We also want to share that Bill's book, Bill Strusinski's book, Care Under Fire, is available for purchase, and he will answer questions, right? And also sign books after the program. So I suspect it's at one of these displays to the side of the room. We'd also ask Ryan Carufo, is he here today? Ryan Carufo. He is of the Washington County Veteran Services. If he is here, please stand. You're here. Did you want to say a couple of words? I wonder if maybe you should come to the mic, just to be sure. We have a crowded room. This is a room full of people who were excited to come together, as we all are at this point, yes.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Oh, what a full room here. Any opportunity to get in front of this many veterans, I have to take advantage of, even though I'm not the best public speaker. But we are back, and we wanted you to know that. So in case any of you have questions about VA benefits, we'll be here to field those, and questions about anything, related to federal, state, or local benefits will be available for you. Okay? We'll be right back there. And we have cards, too, as well. So.
I love that Diane has orchestrated this event for so many years in honor of her brother. Diane Cinnamon, everyone. She is a force, right? Many of you know her personally. That's probably why you so enthusiastically applaud her right now. She deserves that applause. Thank you so much, Diane. Diane reminded me that it is very important that we acknowledge those people who I just mentioned, Bill Strusinski and the two other service members, as well as our two fantastic nurses. If you all could join us on the stage, please, if you have that opportunity, to also just engage in a panel discussion about our service at this point. Yes, and about this meaningful, important day. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here, and welcome home, brothers and sisters. I appreciate that. My name is Bill Strusinski. I was a combat medic in Vietnam. I served with Company A, the 1st Battalion, 26th Infantry, with the 1st Infantry Division. I was a blue spader in the Big Red One. Big Red, go Big Red One. There's a few of you here today, so thank you. By the way, I want you to know the nurses are going to talk here today and present some ideas and talk about themselves and their experiences. These are combat nurses. They know what it's like to come under enemy attack. So we're happy to have them here today. I was going to spend some time going with the details about the history of military medicine, but that young lady did such a fantastic job that I don't need to do it. She did a better job than I did, and I would anyhow. I'd like to share some things and put everything a little bit in perspective for you then in the alternative. I hate snakes. Was that a cobra I just killed? Why is it so hot? Will it ever stop raining? How many days left in country? Will I be brave? Does it hurt when you get shot? Will I make mom and dad proud? Are we really patriots? Lord, don't let me screw up. Why do firefights seem like organized chaos with lots of noise? Did someone yell medic? Where's my morphine pack? Where the hell's the dust off? Why are night ambush patrols full of terror and frequent mayhem? Remember to pull the pin before you throw the damn grenade. I was a medic. A sucking chest wound really does suck. When it came to sutures, the baseball stitch was my favorite. Wow, my training did not prepare me for this. Those are some of my reflections which kind of set the stage for some of the things we're going to talk about today. Are there any other medics, corpsmen, nurses, and physicians in the audience, dust-off pilots? Medic? Thank you for your service, brother. And help me embellish my stories here just a little bit later on, will you? Well, I want to thank all of you in attendance here today. As Douglas MacArthur reminded us so many years ago, the soldier above all others prays for peace. For it's the soldier who must suffer and bear the deepest wounds and scars of war. Today we're going to hear about some traumatic experience of getting wounded in combat and the medical care that followed. You will hear about several first-hand events that shaped these soldiers and Marines' lives, and in fact, all of our lives. But I believe, and you do too, that in war there's no unwounded soldiers. All Vietnam veterans will tell you that it's impossible to forget the fear, the camaraderie, the bravery, and most importantly, the heartache that we all experienced in war. Let me take just another moment to set the stage just a little bit about the fundamentals of Vietnam and some of the statistics there, and you know some of these. 58,319 were killed in Vietnam. There's still 1,800 missing in Vietnam. There were 303,000 plus soldiers and sailors, and Air Force and Navy wounded in Vietnam. There were 1,247 combat medics killed in Vietnam, and I don't know how many corpsmen were killed in Vietnam. We all know the average age of a soldier was 19, and that was all of you. You were all badasses at one time, I can tell you. Still a badass, yeah. 1 out of every 10 Americans was a casualty in Vietnam. More than 106,000 were permanently disabled because of Vietnam. Medevac helicopters flew 500,000 missions. 500,000 missions. That included some of the Vietnamese missions for ARVN soldiers. And lastly, 19.4 million gallons of Agent Orange defoliant was sprayed in Vietnam. That act alone made sure that hundreds of thousands of us would forever remember and suffer from our tour of duty. It never goes away. Now let me turn this over to a panelist for a brief introduction. And to better connect with you, I believe our audience would appreciate a little background of each one of you, about yourselves, including in the branch of service you served, where you were located in Vietnam, the dates of service, location, and any medals. So please, why don't you start right here? Go ahead, Valerie.
My name is Valerie Buchan. I was raised in a small town in northwestern Minnesota called Henning. I got my nursing education at Hamline University's diploma program and graduated in 1957. I worked in the different hospitals in Minnesota and Illinois for 9 years. And then I joined the Army Nurse Corps. My first introduction to anything about Vietnam was Thanksgiving time in 1965. Life or Look magazine had on their cover some flag-covered coffins. And I was at my cousin's for Thanksgiving dinner, and I said, what's going on? Why are we seeing these flag-draped coffins? And he said there was something going on in Vietnam. I said, Vietnam, where's that? Because when I took my grade school geography classes, it was called French Indochina. So I really didn't even know where it was. And he said, well, there's some advisors that got killed over in Vietnam, and that's what this is all about. Well, then at the end of 1965, around Christmas time, all of we nurses got letters from the different recruiters, Air Force, Navy, and Army, because they were having to put up hospitals in Vietnam in a hurry, because the people over there were not necessarily getting hurt at that point, but they were getting sick with tropical diseases. So there was a big push to recruit nurses. And so I did decide to sign up. We had a wonderful recruiter over at the old post office building in Minneapolis. And after I got the mail and sent back the little questionnaire that they had sent out, she sent a staff car over to pick me up. And it was quite an honor. And by the time I left her office, I had signed up. And we had decided that I should go to Japan for my first assignment. The way the medical system worked those days was that the people got initial services in Vietnam as far as stabilizing, getting their wounds cleaned up, getting casts applied, different things like that. And then they were sent to hospitals in the Far East. We had several at that point. Philippines, Guam. In Japan, we had 3 hospitals, plus the big Navy hospital in Yokohama where the Marines went. So I went to the 249th General in Japan first. It was 20 miles north of Tokyo. And the patients came for weeks or several days at least. So that is where I got to know my patients. I should say that before I went to Japan, I went to basic training at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. And as you all know, basic training, they try to make soldiers out of you. So we had the soldiering classes where we learned about the ranks and about the way the Army was set up and how to salute. They had us practice on some weapons. And then we were marching around trying to teach us close order drill. Well, I remember about this marching. They had to do some extra classes because they were getting us ready for a graduation exercise. And so they had us out in the parking lots, marching us around in the evening time. And I always thought that that drill sergeant must have headed for the nearest bar when he was through with the session with us. we just were not very good at it. But we were better at our nursing, I think. And 249th General was a big hospital. It was 1,000 beds. And all of the patients came from Vietnam. And I was so happy to get to know some of them in that setting. And I remember one young man especially who wanted to be a barber, and he got hit in his right hand. So the last I saw of him, he was exercising his fingers on a setup that the occupational therapist made for him, trying to get the use back into his right fingers. And I could tell you about several conversations that I had with those guys because I took care of them like at least several days in a row. Then at the end of 2 years, I went to the 12th Evac Hospital in Vietnam. That hospital was in the southern part of Vietnam, just above the Mekong Delta. And that base camp is famous because there was a book written about the tunnels of Cu Chi. And so that's where we were on the Cu Chi base. Our patients came directly from the battlefield. I remember one in particular, an amputee. And I looked at his records, and according to when the medic out in the field had signed off and when I was taking care of him, it was 6 minutes. So we got the patients very fast and this was one of the good things that are about our system during the Vietnam era, was because we got the patients so fast from the field. The rest of my Army career was spent at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, at the Army Hospital there. And then I came back and I joined the reserves at the 5501 out at Fort Snelling.
My name is Mary Lou Osterberg Bruner, and I was born and raised in South Minneapolis, and at the 50s and 60s grew up there, and to me it wasn't a big city because it was just the neighborhood. Everything was within walking distance. The grocery store, the parks, the church, the school. My friends who are sitting in the third row behind this group, I didn't know they were coming. I don't make a lot of noise about Vietnam. And one of them happened to see in your St. Paul paper that you were gathering here. So I have 3 from grade school here, 2 actually from kindergarten. And I have my sister here, and she's younger. I had 2 brothers and Betty. This one's, I might not get through, but her husband died a few years back. He was a 2-tour Marine, and he was in Vietnam twice. He died definitely of Agent Orange, and many suffered a lot. If you take a look at Summer's picture back there, and you see that anguish that he has drawn, that was Harry. And it was not easy on my sister and her sons. Sitting right next to my sister is Jan. We've not talked a lot, but I took my oath of office with my sister and my mother at my side in May of '67. Janice lost her brother, a Navy corpsman, who was shot going to the aid of a Marine in Vietnam in July of '67. And then I left for the military that September for basic training, like Val talked about. Next to Jan, her husband is a Vietnam veteran. We found out later that he wasn't far from Pleiku and that our tours overlapped a little bit, but his loss, he never met me. Although, to my knowledge, he wasn't wounded, and thank you, God. And thank all of you for coming out, including my close friends, and there are other nurses, like he said. I see Jeannie over there. We've got quite a group, and I think everybody would be willing to answer any of your questions. But to get back a little bit, I always wanted to be a nurse, so that was not a big choice. That was just, I always did. Played with my dolls, wrapped them up in bandages, and I caused most of their injuries. I dropped one and the head cracked. I still have her. So she's going with me to the grave because nobody's wanting that ugly little doll. But at any rate, a family of 6, mom, dad, 2 older brothers, and my sister. I decided, I got very interested in travels. I really wanted to travel a lot. And I had an aunt that used to take her 2 little blue suitcases and get on Greyhound bus. And she traveled all over the U.S. She made it to Canada. She made it to Cuba. She came back with souvenirs, pictures, and stories of her travels. My brothers and their friends being older, being drafted, you didn't volunteer, but you had to put 2 years in of service in the military. So I found out, they're going to Japan, they're going to Africa, they're seeing Europe. I want to be part of that. And I had given some thought to the military just because of those folks being in the military. Like I said, my brothers, who then stayed in for over 20 years, both Navy. And the thought came to me, and as Val said, the recruiters came to me. I couldn't sign up during school. I wasn't quite sure. So coming back, I didn't know what I really wanted to do, and my dad suggested, as your little bulletin says, that the VA might, need help. So I did get accepted there and worked for a year. That was the defining year because I met so many wonderful veterans, heard some of their stories. In Christmas of '66, I had exactly 6 patients on the ward because back in that day, everybody could sign out and go home for weekends, and they went home for the holidays. And there was a sergeant major, and I talked to him at length, and it just, the interest was there. And I loved those guys, and they loved each other, and I saw that camaraderie as patients. So, as I said, I took the oath of office in May. The lady that, I walked in there, made the appointment and walked in. She said, there's a group of prospective nurses going to Denver. She said, we have a trip planned. She said, I think there's about 10 or 12 of them. Would I like to go? I said, sure, I'd like to go. So I spent the weekend in Fitzsimmons in Denver, had a tour of the hospital, tour of the area, and there were 2 male nurses who were responsible for all of us, and they just really treated us well. I'm the only one that decided to stay in. Like I said, I'd already taken the oath. Not one of them joined. But the interesting part is when I got to Vietnam, those 2 male nurses were in the OR at the Pleiku. So one thing my friend Mary wants me to add, too, is to let you know that we are very aware there were a lot of male nurses there. All of our anesthetists were male nurses. We had probably about 5 or 6. And we had OR nurses that were male. So we had quite a group. And she said, don't forget. And so we're very aware that, this was a team. It really was. But when I got after basic, which I won't repeat because she did a good job, when the plane landed, we landed in Long Binh, which was in the south. I think that's the 24th evac. So we were greeted by the nurse there and, all the paperwork and that kind of thing that you go through. But at one point, she sat us down. She said, we need nurses everywhere. And she said, we're especially in need of operating room nurses. So would I pick? I could pick any place I wanted to go. My good buddy said, well, I'm from California. I'd like to be near the water. And they sent her to Chile. And I said, I haven't seen a lot of the mountains. We have no mountains in Minnesota. I'll take the Central Highlands. That's how I got to the 71st. And that's, I was going to say that's kind of the beginning, but I wanted to back up. I'm sorry, I have all these notes. Which shall I read this book to you? I wanted to let you know that when I started in 66 at the VA, we still had that old building, 8 stories tall, the one that they imploded for what you see there today. But the thing that struck me when I walked up those steps, big sign on the wall of the lobby, and it says, the price of freedom is visible here. And that's why it was the Army. And I think I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Tim Sather. Give us a little background, Tim, what was going on. We're going to talk more a little bit later about the day you got wounded. So, but go ahead, give us some background.
Thank you, Bill. My name is Ben Morales.
Or Ben, I'm sorry.
I was born and raised in St. Paul. I joined the Army in 1965 right out of high school. I spent a little over a year at Fort Bragg with the 82nd Airborne before being assigned as a replacement to go and join the 173rd Airborne in Vietnam. I got there in March of 1967. I left country in October of 1967. Our primary area of operation was the Central Highlands, where the North Vietnamese often were running supplies, and they're one of their strongholds up there. I'm just glad to be home. Thank you.
Tim?
My name is Tim Sather. I grew up in South Minneapolis. I graduated from Minneapolis Roosevelt in 1966 at the age of 17. And you all know when you turn 18, you got to sign up for the draft. My next door neighbor went to De La Salle High School, and we were best of friends. He got the letter at the same time I did. Bob says, Tim, you want to go in the Army? I said, not really. I say that seriously because my grandpa was a Marine in World War I in communications. My dad was a Marine in World War II in communications. So I felt kind of obligated to go into the Marine Corps. So I said, Bob, you want to go with the Marines? Sure. That next day we went down to 38th in Chicago, went to the Marine Corps depot there, the recruitment, and signed up. It just so happens that at the same time in January, there was 150, roughly, ladies and men joined the Marines at the same time. So what they decided to do, instead of sending the Marines out to San Diego, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, they formed us here in Minnesota. So we didn't have to sit and wait for our platoon to form, to start training. Well, it just so happens that all 150 of us were told to go out to the old Wolt Chamberlain Airfield and learn how to march. We're going, what do you mean march? Well, we were all sworn in at the old Met Stadium. We marched out of center field over in second base. They swore us all in, and we were sworn in as a Minnesota Twins platoon. And we have the author here from the Minnesota Twins platoon, Christy Sorrow, a good friend of mine, who wrote the book. And I know he spent a lot of time writing the book and interviewing people. But anyway, boot camp, intensive training, then you go to your specialty school. In the Marine Corps, I had no idea how in the hell they picked what MOS you went into. Be it infantry, artillery, communications. Well, after graduation, I found out that I was going into artillery, 105 howitzers. But I made the mistake of being top 5 of my class. They sent us down to 29 Palms, California, and they sent me to radio school because I could read maps. I could read maps, grids, and quadrants. So I ended up going to radio school to become a radioman forward observer. But the friend I went in with, he went in the buddy system, he went into tanks, I went into artillery, and so on and so forth. To make a long story short, I landed in Vietnam on Christmas Day of '67. Stopped off at lovely Okinawa, and left our duffel bags there and all our gear. I landed at Da Nang Airport on Christmas Day, like I said. And we were supposed to be there for a week of orientation. All of a sudden they came back and they said, how many guys from artillery and radio are here? So we all raised our hand. You all come with me now. So we all went over. He goes, a helmet, flak jacket, M16. And says, see that helicopter over there? Get on it. So they said there was no orientation. And believe it or not, back up 1 second. And being Christmas Day, of course, the Viet Cong and NVA knew it was a holiday. So they gave us a little present when our plane landed on the airport. We got rockets and mortar rounds. So we hauled butt into some cement bunkers at the airport. They flew us out. I started out with Gulf Battery, 3rd Battalion, 11th Marines, 1st Marine Division, as a artillery person. Tet Offensive came around, and because I had a 2nd MOS, as well as all you know, radio men did not have a life expectancy of maybe 1 to 3 seconds. That's on a beach assault. So radio men were getting bumped off left and right. Gunny came up to me and said, Sather, he says, go up to the Fire Direction Control Center and sit there for a week and learn the jargon out in the field. You're going to go TAD, which is Temporary Active Duty. I went to Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, 1st Marine Division, as their radio operator and, excuse me, forward observer. Well, the first patrol we went on, AK-47 round went through my radio, blew my radio off my back. Back then, the flak jackets weren't Kevlar. They were metal quadrants. You just slid them in. upper right, lower right, upper left, lower left. Well, it just so happens when my radio blew up, they took my flak jack and peeled it like a banana. Medevac me out to the dang hospital. I laid in my belly for a week while they pulled out shrapnel. They can't do surgery because there was so many small pieces in there. They just plucked it out. Little hydrogen peroxide. And a week later, they sent me back. That was the first time that I met something from Charlie. More patrols, more airstrikes, more artillery strikes. I called in. They had an operation going on. They sent our company out to be a blocking force for the South Vietnamese Army, who we had a battalion in Quang Tri province. We were supposed to be the blocking force. Well, the CH-46 that we rode in on, we landed in a thing called a horseshoe ambush. You take a horse's horseshoe. Our 46 landed right in the middle of that thing. First 4 Marines got off. They were footsteps for us because they fell down dead. Squad leader, the corpsman, and me jumped off the plane as we were running across the rice paddy. Mortar round landed 10 feet from us. Took all 3 of us out. If my left leg would have been in front of me, it would have been gone. But it just so happens it was behind me, and the shrapnel came in, took out my kneecap, my leg was in cartilage. On my right leg, another trip to the hospital. It was Da Nang, as far as I remember. Because 9 days later, I woke up in Yokohama, Japan, at one of the Army hospitals that one of these ladies said they were at. Spent 2 months there. They wanted to medically discharge me, and I said, BS. I said, what do I have to do to stay in? They said, you have to therapy, and you have to lay flat on your back, lift 27 pounds of sand, and hold it up for a minute. I made it to 1 minute and 2 seconds. So they sent me back to headquarters company. They said, I can't go back to my unit because after getting twice, you can't go in the forward combat area. Well, I was on Hill 55. I could stand up at the bunker, and I can see Hill 10. I could see their flashlights walk around on the hill. I said, I'm not in a forward area. Anyway, make a long story short, I spent 2.5 more years in the Corps. Went down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. What a hole. We hitchhiked down to Bruno Beach every weekend as much as we could. And we could sleep on the beach back then. Now you can't do that. So I went to the Gunny. I said, Gunny, I got to get out of here. I can't take this. I have PSCs calling me an E4, sir. So they said, I'll cut orders. You go for the weekend. He said, report to Naval Base, Portsmouth, Virginia, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Virginia. I said, well, Marine Barracks, security, great. Well, for all you sailors, I ended up on a Navy ship over in Holy Loch, Scotland. Marine security, nuclear weapons. And I spent my last 2.5 years on the ship. Oh, not 6 was the last 4 months. Marines can't get discharged off a naval ship. You have to go to the final duty port. And here we're in Scotland. So we end up going to Rota, Spain, South Carolina base, Guantanamo Bay, through the Panama Canal, San Diego shipyard, up to Bremerton, Washington, to Puget Sound, where my ship was at. And I got sent to the Marine Barracks. They wanted to re-up, but they wouldn't give me that extra stripe. But they gave me the 4 years in bonus, but I said, no, thank you. And I said, see ya. And I left. Called the airport, got a plane home to Minnesota. It was 31 below. And I called from San Francisco and I said, bring the warmest clothes you can. And they did. That's some story.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Gotta love the Marines. Well, let me just share with you, I graduated from Hill High School myself in 1964. Go Pioneers. I know that. There we go, see, all right. And I got to the Army and I was asked what I wanted to do. I took a test and they said, you want to shoot a gun and become a rifleman? I said, I already know how to do that. Do you want to be a cook? Do you want to drive a truck? And I knew how to do those things. I said, how about I want to be a medic? Well, they really liked that. They said, volunteered to be a medic. This is great. We're going to send you to hospitals in Germany, Italy. You get your choice. It'll be great. Well, I'll tell you, out of 500 that graduated from my AIT class at Fort Sam Houston, 6 of us went to Vietnam as combat medics. The others went to Germany and Italy as hospitals. I was a 2-year guy. I think that first sergeant knew that. But I don't know if you know that the Vietnam War was the first time medics were directly embedded into the infantry units. In previous wars, medics served near the front, were actually up close to the battles, but it was a different kind of battle. It had battle lines, they were defined. So medics would go into battle after they attacked. They wore armbands. It said white armbands with red crosses on it, on their arms and their helmets, so they were denoted as a medic. And actually, they treated enemy soldiers in Germany and what have you as well, and German medics treated some American soldiers. So it was really, it's fascinating, but we were directly embedded into an infantry unit. Well, that means, as a medic, I can tell you, I never saw a hospital outside of Fort Sam Houston training. I spent 366 days. I was in Vietnam during leap year. Anybody else? I mean, that was, for God, we counted those days, and I said, I have 365. How come I'm not going home? Because there's one more day left, brother. So. And anyhow, medics in Vietnam did not wear those denotations so that people could see who they are. In fact, there was a $500 bonus for killing a medic or a radio man or an officer. And so the only way you could tell that I was different was because I carried an aid bag. Putting medics into small infantry units, as small as a squad, every time a squad went out, I went on patrol. I pulled 200 patrols plus, and I pulled 60 ambush patrols at night because a squad of 10 would go out. Every third night I had to go out on patrol and set up with them. But the goal was to render care as soon as after battle injury occurred. Now, the new Army protocol did save a lot of lives that would have likely have died in previous wars. And in fact, if a medic was injury, a casualty was alive when we got him in the hospital on a helicopter to be dusted off, their chances were 93 to 98% that they would survive their ordeal. Next, I want to talk a little bit about specific job duties, and we'll get into some of that, but I want to kick this off. My job was to make sure that everybody was field ready and fit for combat. I held sick call occasionally and treated illnesses or minor injuries as best I could in the bush. Our company's strength was about 90 on a good day. You didn't get dusted off in our case unless you were really sick or battle injured. I served in 67, August of 67 through August of 68. So we know about those things. On patrol, I traveled as light as possible. All my supplies fit into an aid bag, which weighed about 13 pounds. The contents of my aid bag included 5 morphine syrettes, 1 bottle of lump albumin, 1 bottle of saline solution, a snake bite kit, which I did use a couple of times, malaria pills, iodine, salt tablets, compressed battle dressings, some petroleum gauze dressings for sucking chest wounds, elastic ace wraps, clamps, sutures, tourniquets, an air passage tube, a stethoscope, and a generous supply of pills and ointments. I was the guy people relied on. I also carried a rope, an M16, a bayonet, 6 magazines for my rifle, a 45 for a period of time, 1 Claymore mine, 2 hand grenades, 4 canteens, and 1 flashlight complete with colored filters. Unlike today's soldiers, at least soldiers, the Marines were the fortunate ones. They had flak jackets. We had no body armor whatsoever in the infantry and the Army. And none of us wore the personal body armor. But we did have steel pots, and most of us wore them most of the time. They were not comfortable, and they don't protect you like they did today. My main job was to treat combat casualties, but I did deal with poisonous snake bites, scorpion stings, scrapes, scratches, puncture wounds, dysentery, fire ant bites, hepatitis, infections from leeches and centipedes, jungle rot, broken bones, toothaches, gunshot wounds, shrapnel wounds, punji stick wounds, landmine injuries, and burns. I did suturing, performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, unsuccessfully a couple of times, administered morphine, applied splints, and once immobilized and treated a broken back victim. I dealt with attempted suicides and treated a couple of non-life-threatening self-inflicted wounds. These fellas thought they could get out of Vietnam in the Army, and all I succeeded in doing was taking a couple of toes off their foot. They got to stay in Vietnam, by the way. And too often, all too often, I acted as a counselor. When disagreements surfaced, particularly those that were alcohol-induced disagreements surfaced, or when one of the guys got a Dear John letter, I called myself a jungle therapist. Seems as though these young men, and I was a young man myself, I turned 21 in Vietnam, but they'd rather talk to the medic, like a chaplain or a counselor, and would bring their personal problems to me. Seems that those blue spaders I was in charge of would rather talk to me and share their intimate stories as opposed to getting advice and wisdom from the first sergeant of the company. And I'll tell you that. That's sort of my background. Some of the things I did, I'm not going to go into a lot more details than that, but I'd like the Wounded in Action, I guess Tim started it off too, talk a little bit about the day you became a casualty. And I have to tell you something else. The Gold Star families that are here and whatever, for a lot of them, these soldiers, Marines and sailors, they didn't die alone for the most part. There was brothers in arms with them, and most often there was a medic with them. We were trying to provide comfort to them. They weren't alone. We helped them with their last breaths and wished them well and prayed over them. But I think it's good for us to hear a little bit more about the day that you got wounded, Ben. To tell us what it was like, what happened to you. Did a medic help you? I mean, and what was like your aftercare? Please go ahead, Ben. Start that.
I was wounded on Sunday, October 8th in the evening. We had been pursuing the North Vietnamese that day. We had made contact with them in the morning. So we were in the Thuy Hoa area, which is a lowland coastal terrain, so it's rolling. And we just come down from the Central Highlands, which is more mountainous, or small mountains. And we had made contact with the North Vietnamese, and I heard the gunfire, and then I felt the impact. Had been hit in the right above the left elbow and spun around. And they kept continuing to shoot at me. The bullets were whizzing, the terrain was kicking up around me. The medic and platoon sergeant came and dragged me out of the kill zone, and they were able to stabilize me. And they didn't know, and I didn't know at that time, that I had also been shot in the leg. So we were trying to make it back to the company, but I was losing too much blood, and it was starting to get dark. And we were fortunate that our battalion commander was observing this activity. So he brought his helicopter down, and they hustled me into the helicopter and whisked me off to the 91st Medevac Hospital at the Thuy Hoa Air Base. And then from there I went on to to Camp Zama in Tokyo, and then spent several months at a medical holding company at Fort Ord, California until my discharge. Thank you.
Anything to add, Tim, to your story about the first day you were wounded? Yeah, Tim?
When I got hit getting out the helicopter, like I said, the squad leader and the corpsman in the Marine Corps they were Navy personnel. They trained with us. They trained all our intensive training, and the corpsman, he knew that all three of us were hit pretty bad. He says, "Do you want to get shot?" And I kind of looked at him. I'm going, I already am. Well, a shot is morphine.
Morphine.
And he gave me a shot of morphine, and he took a tourniquet and put on my right leg, and continued to put pressure on it, take pressure off, put pressure on, take it off, so I would not get really bad infection. He wanted to know if I wanted another shot. I said no. I said I got to work the radio. He says, what radio? It was gone. It just so happens that the chopper that was still in the rice paddy was still there when we got in there, and they were able to drag us out, get us on the chopper, and get us out of there. Like I said, I have no idea the time or day, but I was feeling good. And from Da Nang, it was to a hospital ship, to it was Camp Zama Army Hospital. I thought it was in Yokohama, it's Tokyo. And I spent the time there, and the corpsman saved my butt. And whoever the corpsman's out there, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other Purple Heart recipients wounded in war here in attendance today? Raise your hand. Any others? Yeah, you all know what it's like. We all know what it's like. The medic or the corpsman, and I had 10 weeks of training. Can you imagine that? That's what I had. That's the Army protocol, 10 weeks in those days. And believe me, they cannot prepare you for what you're going to deal with. So I understand trainings, on-the-job training that you learn in the military. The medic or corpsman was the first line of emergency treatment that these soldiers and sailors and Marines encountered. You were medevac. They were medevac by many brave and fearless pilots, dust-off pilots. I couldn't believe sometimes these guys would come in to pick up one of my casualties. And I might have had a casualty that I've been treating for several hours because it was a night ambush patrol, and you're 1,000 yards away from the perimeter, and you had to do the best you could and get them to a spot where you can get a dust-off and evacuate them. And you're still being shot at, by the way, and still under fire. You all know what that's like. So now, after the medic takes care of you, gets you on the dust-off. My job was easy. I could relax. Right, Doc? I mean, that was kind of a nice thing about all that stuff. I could relax. Somebody else had to take care of the situation. You arrived at a field hospital and soon were greeted by nurses who took over your care from that point forward. I'd like to ask our nurses, Valerie, would you tell a little bit what it was like to treat these combat soldiers once they got into your care, out of my care? Talk to us a little bit about what it was like when you first brought them in and what you did, how it worked.
My job in Vietnam at the 12th Evac Hospital was head nurse in the emergency room there. I had done nursing on a surgical ward at the 249th in Japan, and when I first got to Vietnam, I was assigned to a surgical ward. It was, I thought, a good deal for me because I was very used to that kind of nursing, and the morale was good because everybody was getting ready to go home. The patients weren't very sick as compared to the patients over in the ICU. They were on the mend and raring to go home. So I thought I was pretty lucky until about the third week. The chief nurse called me to her office and said that she had noticed that I had some emergency room experience on the civilian side, and that Captain Zulke was soon going home. He was the head nurse in the emergency room, and that she wondered if it wouldn't be a good thing for me to go over there and orient with him before he went home. And I said, oh, no, thank you. I wouldn't care to go over there. I'd like to stay where I am. And of course, I soon found out that she wasn't asking me. She was telling me what to do, and I remembered what my dad told me. He was a World War I infantry soldier, and one of the little bits of advice he gave to me before I left home was that I shouldn't argue with people. He said, just do what they say, don't argue with people. So anyway, I didn't argue with her. So that's where I ended up. I was head nurse in the emergency room for those last 11 months. Our patients came in large groups sometimes, and sometimes just small numbers. We also had the mission to care for the Vietnamese Army soldiers. Our mission was to care for civilians and also the prisoners of war. I can remember the patients coming in large numbers, and at that same time, we had incoming onto our base, and I can remember putting the cots down onto the floor and crawling around on our knees, giving care, hanging bottles of plasma and so on. That didn't happen very often. We also got large groups of civilians at the time, and I can think of one time, it was Easter Sunday, and the people in Cu Chi were going to have a festival at their town center. And of course, the VC took the opportunity to put some explosives into the group. And they were badly hurt, and a large number of them. It was Sunday, and our interpreters were gone. So we had, on the day off for Easter, and so we had a hard time communicating with the people that came in. We got the patients kind of organized as to who had to go where. And then the families started coming in, and they were looking for their loved ones. And so it was quite a chaotic scene. Most of the time, things were a little better organized. But that day, we couldn't get it organized because, for one thing, like I said, our interpreters weren't there to help us. And I remember at the end of the day, there was one little boy that didn't seem to have any relatives around. And we tried to ask the other people who were there who he was and could they help with him. And nobody wanted to seem to have anything to do with him. It was kind of puzzling, but he ended up on our Vietnamese ward. Our hospital was made up of several buildings on a ramp kind of thing, and we did have place for civilians over there. Then another time I remember the man who was handling the radio came and told me that a Chinook was landing on our helipad. I asked him how many people were in the Chinook. He said he didn't know, but I knew that quite a few people could fit into that sort of an aircraft. So I called the hooches and asked the nurses who were over there to stand by. We may need extra help. And I also sent the corpsmen back to where the doctors lived to tell them that we might have a large group of patients coming in. Well, when they got the ramp down from the Chinook, I thought, I usually didn't go into the helicopters, but that day I thought I better go in there and see what was going on. So I started up the ramp, and as I'm walking up the ramp, a young soldier is coming down with his medical records under his arm. And I told him who I was and asked him if he'd gotten hurt. He said, "No, ma'am, it's just they found out that I have pneumonia." So I said, "How many more people are in there with you?" He said, "Nobody, ma'am, just me." So later in the day, after we got him organized and got ready to admit him, I asked him how it was that he came in on a Chinook instead of the usual medevac. And he said, well, the Chinook had brought supplies out to them. And he and the corpsman or the medic out there were talking about his situation. And they noticed that the Chinook was getting ready to leave. So the medic told him, go and jump on that Chinook and they'll take you to a hospital. So he was well taken care of when he got to us. I remember another time when we had several patients come in at once, and then they brought in a prisoner, and things got a little tense because one of the young men, one of our soldiers, recognized the prisoner and had some contact with him out in the field. And he wasn't happy to see him, of course. So we had that kind of a situation too. Our system was that we had sawhorses set up in our ER, and then they brought the litters in. You all know what a litter looks like. It's canvas and wood, and they brought them in and put them on the sawhorses so that we could easily move patients around from there to the x-ray or surgery or wherever we had to take them. I'll always remember the people that I took care of because they were so patient and so full of hope. Everybody, of course, wanted to go home. And so they were just wonderful patients to take care of. Our soldiers were just wonderful. Wanted to get ready to go home, were anxious to do whatever they could to get well. It was a challenge to work over there, but it also was a fulfilling experience for me. We didn't have indoor plumbing at our hospital at all, and we had outhouses. And so I'm going to tell you a little story that has a kind of a little funny part, because there weren't many funny things that went on over there, but this I thought was a little humorous. I went over there to the outhouse one afternoon, and the way it was organized was that there was a sidewalk that ran along behind the hospital, and then the emergency room was over here and the outhouse was over here, kind of. So I went over there, and as I went in, the door handle came off in my hand, and I heard the other end of it go off on the outside, drop to the ground. So I wondered how I was going to get out of there. Of course, I couldn't get the door open. So the only way I could see the sidewalk that ran behind the hospital was to get down and look under it. The wall was made out of slats so that the air could circulate. And I could get down and look over onto the sidewalk and see the feet of people going. So pretty soon I did see a pair of sandals come along, and it was our little mama-san who helped us in the emergency room going down to get supplies at Central Supply. And so I called out to her, Mama-san, Mama-san, and I saw her turn all around trying to figure out where this voice was coming from. And then she came over to where I was after I called a couple of more times. And I asked her to go and get Sergeant Backus. He was our ward master at the ER. And she understood that. She didn't understand much English, but she got his name. So I was watching through the slats. Pretty soon I saw his big boots and her little sandals come back. And I heard a little smile in his voice when I said, "Do you think you can get me out of here?" He said, "Yes, I think so. I'll have to go and get some tools." So he took the door off, and I finally got out of that very unpleasant place. I was going to tell you also about an occasion we had in our hooches. We and the Red Cross people lived in these little hooches, again, with the slatted walls. Well, one night I was sitting on my bed reading, and I felt someone stop in my doorway. And we all had these little cubicles where we lived. And so I looked up, and I was surprised. It wasn't one of the women, it was a young man standing in my doorway. And so as I started to get up off my bed, he ran away. And I headed for the phone to call for the MPs, because I knew, of course, that he wasn't supposed to be in there. Well, on the way to the phone, I encountered two of the other nurses. And I wasn't armed at all, but they were. One of them had a big cast iron black frying pan, and the other one had a golf club. So once the MPs got a hold of him, and we all settled down again.
Well, as I mentioned, what I forgot to mention was the Army was offering special classes when you went to basic. And one of them was the operating room course. It was 5 months long. And people were already getting orders for Vietnam. And of course, the conversations were, I didn't volunteer. Well, you found out you didn't have to volunteer. So I decided I would like that class. I thought that would help me be more prepared. So that's how I became the operating room nurse. Otherwise, it was just a few weeks, at my school. So at any rate, I did put in for that, was accepted, and that was at Letterman General out in San Francisco. So I worked on the wards right after Thanksgiving, and then about January 8th, the class started. So, and it really was a good class, but of course you got to remember it's stateside, and everything is pristine in the hospital, surgical suites. That wasn't exactly the case when I got to Pleiku. It was one large room. We had 5 operating room tables, so we could do 5 at a time. Now, Val would have been, if she was in Pleiku, she would have been the nurse that was prepping those patients for OR. And we had some notice. We obviously could go out and see what was coming. So we knew if we needed a particular doctor. Did we have somebody with a head injury, eye injury, amputation, whatever, on and on. We had just about every doctor there. Now, those docs were on call 24/7. We worked a 12-hour shift 6 days a week. But it was the doctor that, when you think about it, could go around the clock, depending on what we had. And we too had very quiet minutes and moments, and the guys would get out the chessboard, you'd write a letter or whatever. Everybody talked about the world and what they were going to do when they went home. They shared their care packages, and the camaraderie was there. But when you got busy, that was one of the best teams I've ever seen before or after. They never grumbled about anything. The majority of the time I worked nights. Then I worked with about 6 OR technicians. And if we needed more help because we were going to run a long time, we could then call other people in. The first chain of command, you might say, was the non-commissioned officers or sergeants that were in charge of the technicians. And so our job, all of us, was basically to keep that OR running smoothly. We had to wash all the instruments, repack them, send them to be sterilized. We're constantly stocking things. And it certainly was a challenge many times. A lot of, as Val also pointed out, we took care of soldiers, obviously, the citizens, Vietnamese. We, being in the Central Highlands, had the indigenous Montagnards or mountaineers or mountain men, and families, children, and POWs. So we took care of everybody as best we could. When I was on the day shift, it was about maybe 2 months when I first got there. If we weren't busy, we would take, we called it med capping, and there is a military term for that. But what it basically was a sick call. So a few people, doctor, nurse, corpsman, would go out to the village, and we would examine people. If there were illnesses, anything we could do for them, we did. We also would find folks with little ones with cleft palates and things of that sort. And if we were quiet in surgery, then we could help. We could do that. We did have a plastic surgeon, so it worked out good. I always felt good about what we could, do for them. But at any rate, I don't care. The military it took good care of us. I really think they did, but there was no way they could have prepared you for war wounds. And they weren't simple. As Tim said, you might have a leg full of those shrapnel wounds or something of that sort, but nobody had too many simple wounds, and they had many wounds. And it wasn't very pleasant, but the pleasant point of it was we did actually deliver babies too. We had several Vietnamese babies born in the OR. So I have a picture of me cuddling a couple of them. I went on a leave. We had 2 leaves. We either had a 5-day leave or a 7-day R&R. Is that what they called it? Vacation. 2 vacations. Think of that. A year's job, 2 vacations. That's pretty good. Anyway, when I came back, the corpsmen that I worked with they were just unreal. But anyway, it was close to Christmas, and they said to me, "Oh, you missed the delivery. We had triplets." I said, "Triplets? Really? That's got to be very rare." He said, "It was Joseph, Mary, and Jesus." But Jesus died. So to this day, I never really, are those guys pulling my leg? I still don't know. Maybe it was twins. But anyway, like I said, I remember when I met my husband in the 70s, he asked me how many children I wanted. And I said, I'd like 12 boys. We just talked about it the other day, and I thought, I think that's why I said 12 boys, because those technicians I was working with, those OR guys, were 18, 19, 20, and they were full of fun. And they would try jokes and trying to get away with things, but, they were really hard workers. Some of ours, Mary and I have talked about that, this other OR nurse over here, after they pulled a 12-hour shift, some of them went to the guard duty lookouts, around the perimeter of the compound. So they were hard ones. At any rate, I'm trying to think. Like I said, I got too many notes here. Oh, I could tell you. Miss Buchan here is a much better joke teller than I am, or funny storyteller. But I will say that after we got rather busy in Pleiku, and so what they did was they cut out that sick call to the village. So the chief of the village asked us to a feast, if you will, a thank you dinner. So we all went. And I was taught to be very polite and eat everything on your plate and thank everybody for everything. Never want to offend anybody. So anyway, I'm trying everything on my plate, and I pick up this long red thing, and I thought, I don't know what that was. I just bit right into it. Well, it was a hot pepper. I don't even know how those folks can still eat that. I can't. But anyway, it just, the fire in the throat. My eyes were watering. I thought I was going to lose my contacts, that they were going to flow right out. But though, and I'm in misery. And all of a sudden, I hear this snickering. And when I can see, I'm looking around. Then they really start to laugh. They did it on purpose. I was the brunt of their joke. But it dawned on me that, these folks are like anybody else around the world. We're all the same. And if I could make it, and they can laugh a little, that's okay, in this big war zone that they're in. But I think that's it.
Thank you. We're going to continue a little bit for longer, but I wanted to share a little bit about what's the strongest memory they have from from service in Vietnam and their time, and all of our panelists. But let me start it off by saying that for me, I realized in Vietnam that life can't get any worse than this. And when you're on patrol, out on an ambush patrol, you got a casualty. Life cannot get any worse than that. But I also realized, and my strongest memories, I remember when I made the decision that I can do anything that I put my mind to. You can rise to the occasion. Who are you going to call? Nobody I could call. I was the one who was expected to fix the problem. I also developed a deeper love for my country, and I realized that we could, because 40%, almost 50% of our unit was black. Remember the 60s? They were pretty turbulent times. But I remember that in spite of the racial strife, that we all in the infantry learned how to get along and to take care of each other. That was really important. I realized and I learned that empathy and compassion were necessary to help heal the wounds of war. And I would also realize that I have a lifelong, hopefully after the Vietnam War, to process the heartache for the rest of my life, which I have. You think about that stuff. And when I think most important about Vietnam, that really is precious and important to me, I realized the relationship between the soldier, the infantryman, the rifleman, if you will, and the medic was special. I consistently tried to express my empathy through my actions. I learned how to do that. You had to learn how to keep yourself calm. You were the one that got to get up and move around after the firefight started to go try and get to the casualties and take care of them. I learned how to use a calm voice. I was surprised at myself to offer words of comfort. But sometimes my calm voice fell on lifeless ears, and you all know what that's like. Now, soldiers are trained to put medics, and medics are trained to put broken soldiers back together again. But I think the most important thing is the relationship that developed between the soldier and the medic. I remember that most of all. I could count on my brothers to take care of me, and they could count on me to take care of them. That special bond endures forever. And I wanted to share that with you today. Other important things that stand out for any of you, go ahead. You want to start down there, Lieutenant Tim? In particular memories?
I grew up real fast. 18 to 23 within about 4 days. And you all know that when you're in boot camp, you have a lot of camaraderie, and you still have it today. And I still have it today. Christy Sorrow, Marine Corps. Any Marines out there? Diane Cinnamon and Mark and Jackie and Shannon. Their brother was in the twin platoon in the Marines with us. I don't know if you knew that or not, but he was a high school Minneapolis Roosevelt kid like me. We came home on leave and we partied. And we were best of friends too. And that's what I remember about the camaraderie of being in the military service.
Ben?
Upon arriving in my new company there at Benoit Air Base, been there 2 days, and first field come and said, "Come on, we're going over to Graves registration." At that time, I didn't know what Graves registration was. And here one of the fellows, another replacement from Fort Bragg, had accidentally been killed the night before, and he wanted me to go and identify his body. And like Tim says, I grew up real fast right there when I seen my first dead American GI. It was quite a rude awakening, and it was a very difficult task. Under fire, it happens so fast that afterwards it kind of sinks in. But as Bill mentioned too, also that Vietnam itself was a lot more than what we might think of as combat. The terrain, the weather, being eaten alive by insects,
The snakes.
sleep deprived, lack of supplies, clothing rotting right off our bodies. That was something that was unfamiliar to me. And we spent 6 months in the field, 173rd. We didn't have a home base. We left Benoit Air Base in May, and I never went back there. I got my duffel bag about a year after I got out of the Army. So, and one thing I do kind of goes through my head, the North Vietnamese, they smoked, I'm not quite sure what it was, but you could smell it, and you knew that they were close by. So they kind of give you a little heads up that we're in the same neighborhood, so beware.
No, they weren't lucky strikes.
Thank you.
Mary?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, it was the teamwork, because these people came from all over. We were all trained by somebody somewhere, and the military did try to prepare us, but I was amazed at how well they melded. But another one was, it was just the whole year was a roller coaster of emotions. Up, down, up, down. You laughed one day, you cried the next. And in surgery, the one thing that was really hard to accept was that we didn't have the time to get to know anybody. We didn't know our patients, or we didn't know them by name. We didn't know what became of them when they left. And so whenever I see a group of veterans, I like to know that they made it home, because there's no other way we would have found those things out. And that was really hard to swallow as well.
In a year's time, of course, there are many memories that one makes. But there are a few patients that you don't forget. I'm thinking about one of the first days that I was working in the ER was just actually an orientation. And a young man was brought in. He was from Illinois, and he had been hurt very badly. A lot of bleeding going on, internal injuries, shrapnel. And we worked a long time, like a couple of hours, because he was alive when he came to us, and we were trying to save him. But in the end, we couldn't, and he passed away. And as I turned to walk away, I happened to look down, and it was a practice to take the belongings from all of the pockets and put them on a table at the end of the litter. And I happened to look down there, and his ID card was on top. And I picked it up and looked at it, and this was his 21st birthday, this very day. And I remember being so overwhelmed with sadness that I was just immobile for a few minutes. And I learned that day that I couldn't get that emotionally involved, or else I wasn't going to be able to do the work that I was supposed to do there. So it was a kind of a decision, but we also didn't have time to get to know people. But there are some other patients that I remember often, think about them, and that was the young man that went down with the helicopters and got burned. When they got to us, they were very conscious, and they were in a lot of pain. And of all of the war injuries that I took care of, those are the ones that bother me the most. I didn't get to talk to them, I didn't get to know them, but I'll never forget them. Those patients got special treatment in a way because after we initially gave them care in our ER, they were taken to a fixed wing aircraft that was ready to go. And when those patients left our hospital, one of the doctors from our hospital always went with them through the whole trip. They took them down to Tonsanut where they got on a Air Force plane, and then they took them to San Antonio to Brook Medical Center, which had the burn unit. And of course I didn't ever get to know what happened to them, but those are the people that I think of a lot. I also do remember the staff, as Mary Lou pointed out, and you pointed out. It was a wonderful camaraderie that developed between people. Something that I had never experienced before, and that I always remember is the wonderful working relationship, and how when things got tough, everybody knew just what to do. They did their job, and we took care of each other. And I actually am grateful for the experience. I am a person of faith, and when I went there, I felt led to do that. This was a job that I should do, and I'll always be grateful for the people that I met and for the opportunity to take care of these wonderful Vietnam veterans.
Thank you. You know, I can just share with a little bit. We're all related. If you understand, the theme is wounded in war. But let me just tell you that all of us, and I remember myself, my brothers, and who were killed in battle, the casualties I took care of, and the heartache I still carry. A lot of us, myself included, have in our dreams we fret about what we could have done that was different, that could have made a difference, could have done more, saved. Could the outcome be different? We dream about these things, and perhaps many of you do as well. But we always know the outcome's always the same. You can't change the results. We can fantasize about what might have been, but that's really hard. It's been hard for me, and I'm sure it's been hard, as you can hear by these stories today. One final thing before we get to a conclusion here, I'd just like to give our panelists a quick moment to talk about what Vietnam Veterans Day means to you, if anything. And let me just kick it off. To me, Vietnam Veterans Day is a time to grieve. It's a time to reflect and a time to forgive. You got to move beyond that to get to our ages. And yet there's only a third of us left who served in Vietnam. Grieve, reflect, and forgive. You can forgive, and I have, the protesters who greeted us upon our return home. Didn't like to, but I had to move on. I can forgive those draft dodgers who went to Canada. I got beyond that. But whatever you do, don't any of you forgive that damn Jane Fonda for what she did to all of us. Her actions were immoral. So this special day of remembrance should have be a time of healing and a chance to tell your story. Our stories have purpose and can heal the wounds of a nation. Just so. That's what this day means to me. And our reflections can really help others and fellow veterans find peace. Any other reflections anybody wants to share up here about what Vietnam Veterans Day means to you?
Well, I'm glad for this special day because I think that it's a time to reflect. It's a time to remember. But it's also a time when the Vietnam veterans are given the respect that they deserve. And that, of course, has always been a hard thing for all of us to swallow, is what happened when we all came home at first. And so I'm glad for this day that's set aside, especially for all of us.
Mary Lou, any thoughts?
Basically, I'm going to say ditto. I believe in both what Bill and Val have said. And if it wasn't for this Legion, I don't even know if I would be all that knowledgeable about this day, or the fact that it's something to celebrate. And like he said, grieve if you must, be happy if you must. Thank God we're all here.
For me, it's a time of remembrance of young men who have lost their future, and they will always be young. I see their faces as teenagers yet, and I don't think it's a haunting feeling. It's just a sadness that comes over me to still remember them that way. May they rest in peace.
Thank you.
For me, it's time to reflect what we had, what we lost, what we've come back to as a group of Vietnam veterans, where you can express yourself, relieve, get it off your chest, small groups, big groups, this group. If you haven't had a chance to express yourself, join a group. If you're having a problem, join a group. There's many, many groups out there that you can join. It doesn't have to be the Vietnam vets. It can be a DAV. It can be American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Military of the Purple Heart, any of these groups. If you're having problems, there's too much suicide going on right now with all the veterans. Get help. And Vietnam Veterans Day, for me, it was a start. I've been lucky. I had never had those thoughts. Good family, good life. I'm glad I had it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let me wrap it up here with a couple of closing comments to our panel. I'm not making a shameless plug for my book, With Care Under Fire, but I have to tell you, it was very therapeutic for me to write it. Having dealt with a lot of these issues for the years. And I can tell you, I was extremely proud. My book, that book last year, from the Independent Book Publishers Association, the national award, won 2 national awards. One of them was a finalist in the category for memoirs, Overcoming Adversity and Tragedy, but it was ranked the #1 best military nonfiction novel for 2022. And I appreciate the accolades, but really the book, the story, all those awards, the recognition belongs to all of you. I happen to write my story out for good therapy reasons, but it does cover that stuff, and it belongs to all of us. Let me wrap this up for us, and I think we all remember those who went to Vietnam and never came home. We do that on Memorial Day. But remember, we must remember, as we heard just a moment ago, all those who came back but were never the same again. For many, their bodies came home from Vietnam, but their minds never did. Many veterans live with the horrors of war every day, and far too many have committed suicide as the final solution to their peace. 133 veterans in Minnesota each year commit suicide. It's way too many. If you see a vet in need, help him or her get assistance. For me and for most combat veterans, Vietnam veterans, it would be dishonest to state that the length of our time in service was calculated by the number of years we served in uniform. You heard today about all of this stuff. It would be a more accurate measure if we included in the calculation the years we spent reliving our experiences. When I was drafted in 1966, I was told that I had to give the Army 2 years. That was not true. My mind and my body, thanks to Agent Orange exposure and other illnesses, have been dealing with these war-related events and issues for over 50 years. All of us were sentenced to a lifetime of military service through remembering. I'm sure I can speak for the caregivers on this panel and for Wounded in Action. All of us were honored to render aid to soldiers, Marines, sailors, and airmen during some pretty extreme conditions. You heard about them today. For me, I think my time in Vietnam was worth every moment, though I didn't like it at the time. Perhaps this conviction is for us, at least, is really simple. Maybe we ended up being in the wrong place, but for many soldiers, we were there at the right time. Now, our country can never give us back what we have lost and protected. None of us. A grateful nation will always be thankful for the sacrifices we made. But remember this, veterans have truly given us freedom, security, and led the way to building the greatest nation on earth. On behalf of this wonderful panel of care renderers and combat veterans, I want to say, God bless our frontline workers and medical workers who helped us through the COVID pandemic, because we're here again today. God bless our Gold Star families. We know the sacrifices and heartache they have. God bless the nurses and all those who render care under fire. God bless all Vietnam veterans and your families for the fine work that you did in Vietnam and the work that you still do. God bless the Ukrainians for standing tall and fighting the evil empire. And finally, God bless America. And Larry House, thank you for bringing this day forward. And Representative Detmer, you made this happen. It's a state law. So thank you.
So once again, thank you to the American Legion Post 225 for hosting this annual event. We are so grateful for it. We also want to acknowledge again Diane Cinnamon. She doesn't want the acknowledgement, perhaps. She pointed out what she wanted in the script. This was not included, but I think it's really important to acknowledge her contributions, again, recognizing her own brother's service as well. And we want to thank each of you for coming and for staying, for your service, for listening here today. It is so important that we listen to each other and honor this service and, again, this chapter. Thank you again to the veterans. We understand, we appreciate you, we celebrate you, we thank you. Thank you for being our role models, and again, thank you for being here and for your service. And with that, Abby Gordy will close our program by leading us in song. Has Abby left? Her mom is going to step in. I love that. Wendy Gordy will close our program by leading us in song, God Bless America. Yes, mom stepping in for daughter. Love it.
Well, I'd love if you would stand with me and let's sing it together. And what an honor, and we must not forget. And thank you so much. God bless America, the land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night.